Last week, I sort of hinted that I might have something big planned for this week, and I did. But on second thoughts, I've decided now's not really the time for it, and I kind of fancy making something instead. So let's make something instead. Last Christmas, I got this macrame wall hanging kit as a gift, and given that I'd also just decided to add Get Into Macrame to my 2023 craft goals list, this was some excellent gift buying and well played, Dave. But you know, just owning the kit sadly isn't enough to make me a macrame expert. I actually have to find the time to do it. Feels like absolutely ages since I just sat and relaxed and did an inconsequential craft. So yeah, this video might be more for me than for you if I'm honest, but you never know. You might be about to discover your new favourite craft. Only one way to find out. So here we are. The kit makes a wall hanging that honestly I think will go nice in our living room if I can pull it off. It seems like it includes everything I'm going to need except for a fancier stick, and yeah, I could go out to the woods and find one, but it's about 5,000 degrees out there, so I think we'll just stick with the dowel. Inside we have cord. Lots of cord. This is really hefty and heavier than I expected, but it's not rough, so that's nice. I hate working with rough materials. The dowel itself is definitely a lot shorter than the stick used in that cover image, and also it's basically the same colour as the cord. I could paint it to make it more interesting, but I'm way too impatient, so maybe I can make life complicated for myself and do that later if I don't like how it looks. S-hook, it says this is for hanging the piece while you work on it, but I can't quite visualise that right now. Hopefully there are some instructions. Instructions! So we've got a reference copy of the cover image, which is definitely going to be handy, and on the other side are the full instructions. Then there's also this handy booklet taking you through the various knots step by step. This actually looks really straightforward, and I can feel my confidence rising already. Now for some reason I thought macrame was always a tabletop activity, so that's why we're on the table right now, but first things first, I need to find somewhere where I can actually hang this up to work on it. My first idea was to take down these pictures and use the hooks behind, but then I realised, how does this even work? I can't attach that S-hook to a picture hook, but also since there's only one of them, am I supposed to get it in the exact centre of the dowel somehow and balance it? I took to the internet to try and find out how people use these hooks, but everyone seems to use two, and I double checked there's definitely only one in the kit, so after a bit of confusion I decided to ignore this hook and fashion my own solution. I took the hooks from the over-door shoe organiser that holds all of my needle felting and miscellaneous stuff. Tried them on the back of my computer chair, on the dining chairs downstairs, both of those were a bit wobbly. But then I remembered there's this random shelf lying around from when I reorganised the whole room last year. I can lean it against the wall and sit on the floor. Sorted. Was I missing something really obvious with the provided S-hook? I mean, probably, and I'm sure someone is going to be along in the comments to point it out and make me look like an absolute fool. But in the meantime, I think we can all agree that this was another victory for just owning a load of random stuff that you can use to fashion solutions. You know, otherwise known as hoarding. So with that setup out of the way, past me could move on to actually making a start. So, the first instruction tells me to unwind the cord. Not sure if there's a particular technique here. Maybe I should have set up my yarn winder, but I think this stuff might be too heavy for it. This is a predictable disaster, and you know what? I'll just come back when it's done. Alright, let's make a deal. Let's never speak of how long that took, okay? Anyway, I need to cut a load of lengths, and I was going to use the handy measurements on my cutting mat, but it's asking for centimetres and this is imperial. Tape measure it is. I'd kind of expected this part to be long and boring and just a barrier to doing the actual fun stuff, like the cutting out part in sewing. But in reality it didn't take long at all to cut 18 lengths of cord, and I was ready to actually make some knots. The first step is to attach all 18 cords to the dowel with something called a lark's head knot. It turns out this is actually the same knot I use to attach embroidery floss to my floss drops, although what I think of as the front is apparently the back. See, I'm learning new things. It's easy enough to do, just pass the folded in half cord up behind the dowel and pull through the loop. So this part was relatively undramatic, and next step is just to space them out across the dowel, leaving room for the edge cords. Okay, looking at the picture, there are 4 more cords to be added at each edge, so these are definitely more cramped on the small dowel than they are in the cover image, but I think it should be just about right. Honestly, I'm just eyeballing things right now. Right, now we can really get going, because the next task is a whole row of square knots. The trusty how-to booklet has a very simple method for this, so let's just see how that goes. Behold my real-time pace as I try and look from my hands to the booklet and back and make any sense of it at all. This first knot was slow. It's actually very simple and the instruction booklet was really clear, but I was wary about making assumptions and building wrong muscle memory, so I just made real sure to follow the instructions exactly. By the time I got to the end of that first row though, I was a total expert in square knots. Unfortunately, I had also made a pretty big mistake. See, right, in the booklet it teaches you to make the knot tight up against the dowel, and the written instructions didn't mention anything different, so I just followed the pictures. But then I looked at the cover image to compare, and there is definitely supposed to be a gap left between the dowel and this first row. On top of that, looking at it more closely, they've clearly used what the booklet calls the back of this lark's head knot as the front, which is what gives us this row of bumps at the top here. And it does look weird without them, so I made the decision to basically start again before I went too far. Oh, that looks so much more like the photo now, thank God. Okay, so next I need to do a load more rows of square knots. This time though, I'm going to leave out 2 cords at the start and use the next 4, so the first knot will be sort of offset from the ones above it. The row after that I'll leave out 4 cords at the ends, the row after that 6, etc, etc, you get the idea. That is what's going to give us this nice triangle shape here. This was actually very relaxing. It's definitely my favourite bit of the whole thing. If I could have spent all day sitting there tying square knots, I totally would have done. Pretty happy with that so far. So next we do these side bits one at a time, and I reckon this is probably where it gets a lot harder, but we'll see. I've cut and attached 4 more bits, and I think the trick with this part is going to be getting these angles right, so it might take a couple of attempts. Once again, I am referring to the instructions next to me, and here goes. So you sort of hold that one where you want the line to go, and then... hang on, what? Going from this to this is a bit draw the rest of the owl, I have to say. Round 2! Oh, I have absolutely no idea if that is right. Alright, you know what? I'm going to edit this process because otherwise I could turn it up to 800% speed and it would still be way too slow. Watching this back, I hadn't really done anything too wrong, but I just didn't know how to do the flip, which I'll catch you up on in a little bit. All I knew at the time was that I felt like I needed more hands, and it didn't quite look like the picture, and I didn't know why. So I frogged it and started again. Is it still frogging in macrame? It is now. Great success. And look, you're supposed to do this tight up against the top, and I definitely didn't do that last time, so it's actually a good thing I frogged. Now to figure out going this way. All it says is to reverse the knots. Nope, that's nonsense. Why is every knot a different size? Now, past me is telling you this won't do, but actually she's so close she just doesn't realise it. Oh well, she frogged it again anyway. Okay, that took a few goes, but I got there. Perseverance. I'm gonna do some more and then I'll show you what I've learned next time I go back in that direction. So I'm doing these knots, right? And look, it's just a regular looking knot. But that's not what we want. Let me loosen that back up. See how holding the left cord tight and the right one loose kind of lets the right cord loop around that unmoving left one? I can tighten that loop around the left cord like so. Doing it again, that looks like a regular knot. Loosen it up. Now I can maneuver that loop into place and tighten. It seems like it's just the first couple of knots that are dodgy like that, then the loops sort of go where they're supposed to more easily as I work down the row. Beautiful! Now I just need to repeat this another 1,000 times. Okay, so this left side is done, although I've got to say I am nervous about how much cord is left. I'm not sure if we attach more later or if I've maybe done something wrong, but what's cut is cut, so no sense panicking now. By the time I got to work on the right hand side, I was so much better at this. Muscle memory was kicking in, and I'd also worked out how to sort of tug the cord in a special way that encourages it to flip from a regular knot to that loop we talked about earlier. If you've ever tried tatting, it's essentially the same thing as the flip in that. If you haven't, it's basically impossible to explain in human words, so you're out of luck. But it seems like your hands do figure it out on their own eventually. Alright, we are back on the door since we're working on the lower down bits now. The next step is apparently to join these two sides together, and I'm looking at the screen and I can say they're not totally symmetrical, but they are a lot better than they look from that angle you're looking at them from. So I continued, oblivious to the fact that wearing this strapless dress was making me look like I'm macrameing naked, and also that my shoulder was about 5 shoulders wide. At this point I did kind of know it wasn't looking quite right, but sometimes with a new craft you just gotta trust the instructions, so I barreled on anyway. Okay. A few problems going on here. Firstly, the instructions think I'm an expert now. I am not. Also, it wants me to make this nice smooth curve, and I have no idea how to achieve that. And finally, this bit is supposed to be horizontal, and mine is not. I'm just gonna try the curve and see. I do not get this. There's a weird bit hanging here. What's going on with that? There's a gap here. It didn't say to join these two sides together, but maybe I was supposed to? The last step is supposed to be doing these bits at the side here. I'm definitely not convinced, but I guess I'll just keep going and hope it all comes together. I don't know, I'll check back with you in a bit. And then I did not, in fact, check back in with you in a bit. See, I took a step back and I was looking at the proportions of this, and they're just totally wrong. The instructions were very light on details like how big and far apart things should be, but one measurement they did give was the intended height between these diagonals at the side. Mine was slightly off, but only slightly, and yet somehow that whole V section was looking really disproportionately long. So it was decision time. Do I finish it off and just bodge some bits I'm not happy with for the sake of the finish? Honestly, I do sometimes do that, and I'm very vocal about mistakes not mattering, and it's all about the journey, and the 3 feet rule, and blah blah blah. But sometimes, just occasionally, I do get the urge to do it right. I decided to, off camera because I'm an amazing video maker like that, rip out this entire bottom section. I took the sides back up to here, and then I did the rest over again. I joined that bit that had the weird gap, I redid the curve along the bottom, and because I'd removed some height from the actual knotted part, I figured it would leave a more pleasing amount of cord to dangle at the bottom. So did it work? You be the judge. I am so happy I went with my gut. Even though it's now technically not the same as on the cover image, I have one less of those sideways V's on either side, I think the proportions are so much better. I got that horizontal bit way more horizontal the second time around as well. So what's the verdict on macrame? Well, first the craft itself. This was great. I absolutely loved it. Especially that first bit with all of the square knots, it was so relaxing. Some crafts I do find it can take a while to find the joy in them, especially something that requires a lot of practice. But other times you're just sold immediately, like when I discovered the stabby catharsis of needle felting. And for me, macrame is definitely falling into that latter category. Other than a couple of false starts, the knots were really easy to get to grips with, and now I feel the urge to start filling the house with more macrame stuff. Uh-oh. On the other hand though, we have this kit specifically. I'm not going to say for sure that only coming with one S-hook was actually a problem, but it coming with no instructions on how to use it was a problem from the perspective of an absolute beginner. The instructions themselves were fine, but I did have to do a lot of cross-referencing between them and the cover image, so a line about that at the top would have gone a long way. Of course, they also could have done with being a bit more specific about sizes and spacing, but I kind of get the impression that's a macrame-wide thing. I'm honestly still not sure if that bit towards the end was meant to be joined together or not. It's really hard to tell from the cover image because the printout is quite low quality and blurry, so maybe a higher res image would have helped a lot as well. And there is always the issue that this hanging is supposed to be about 1 meter long, whereas mine is maybe 70 centimeters at a push. So either I did something wrong, or maybe the lengths that they instruct you to use are wrong, or something. Given that there's only a very tiny amount of cord left, I'm pretty sure it wasn't me, but I don't actually know. So yeah, I probably wouldn't recommend this particular kit for an absolute beginner, but I definitely would recommend macrame. I know a few of you out there have been toying with giving this a go yourselves, so please do, and please report back with what you make of it. I think I found a whole new love, honestly. Right, better shoot off. Thank you for watching my faltering first steps into knot-based art. I'll be back soon with some more crafty nonsense, so in the meantime, have a brilliant rest of your day and keep making cool stuff. Bye!